Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Mainstream Indie Music Podcast. I am Sarah, and I welcome everybody here, especially the 10 new subscribers that we got since last week. A special welcome to you, and a special welcome to any guests that have stumbled upon or researched into our podcast now. And we hope that you can join us every week. You know, this is a podcast where I started it just wanting to raise awareness and talk about bands that I grew up listening to that I feel like never got a very fair chance or fair exposure. And I'm just doing my small part in trying to raise awareness of them. This week is no different. This week is actually a band I've been meaning to talk about for a while. But the problem I had was I didn't really know the angle that I wanted to approach this as, until I did a lot of research into how the band writes music. And it's kind of like a light bulb went off. You know, it's like I found the angle that I was looking for. So a little bit of background before we go into their songwriting styles, like I mentioned. Young the Giant is from Irvine, California. And they started out around 2004, but the timeline is a little bit iffy because they were actually, I think it was right after high school for most of the band, except for a couple of them were still in high school as well. And so the rest of them were in colleges, different colleges around. But initially, their band was called the Jakes, which was just simply like an acronym of everybody's name. And, you know, it was kind of just meant to be like a fun project. Until, of course, they kind of hit that moment that every single college band hits where all of them have to get together and kind of have that conversation of, do we or can we do this for real? You know? And of course, that's when they decided yes. One of the bandmates did leave. He ended up moving all the way across the country. So they had somebody else come in and take his spot. It was the old drummer of the Jakes. And they performed at a festival. It went very well. And at the time, not a lot of people might know this, but Cough Syrup was which is probably to date their most popular song, was actually written by the Jakes and even composed and put together. So they had been performing that song for a very long time. And it was starting to even get some radio play, at a radio station out in Los Angeles. But then their keyboardist left the band shortly after that. So once again, you know, it's kind of like they're right back at the start again, wondering what to do. So the very first thing they did was they renamed the band to Young the Giant as we know it today. And Samir, the lead singer and writer, has said that it's a name not really meant, it doesn't really have a deeper meaning behind it. But it also kind of reflected where they were then, where, you know, they weren't an up-and-coming band like a lot of people. You know, I kind of imagine they kind of envision themselves hoping to start off like the Arctic Monkeys, where they're super young, get popular right away, but that didn't happen. But I think more than anything, he says it doesn't really mean too much. And then they actually were still working on their debut album while touring. Yes, I said that correctly. The Young the Giant's debut album was recorded live on the road, and then, of course, later sound mixed after that. One cool thing was they were opening up for Minus the Bear and Steel Train, where a lot of people might have heard that name before. That's Jack Antonoff's first original band before he joined the super band Fun. So that was kind of cool. You got everybody in there together, Minus the Bear, Steel Train, and Young the Giant. Like I said, all their tracks were performed live, and then they were produced together. as well. And once again, Cough Syrup ended up being one of the biggest hits off of that album. But another huge song that got popular off that album was their first single off of the debut album called My Body. And it peaked at number 5 in the Billboard Alternative Songs chart. But, and this is a future video idea I want to talk about one day. Because many of you know, in the mid 2000s to the early 2010s, when iTunes was huge and pretty much your only source of music, on their main webpage, there used to be a section under the iTunes webpage, which was a free section. And they would highlight it as well, where a song and a music video every single week would be released for free that you could download. And I can't tell you how many indie bands, or at least bands where maybe they're not quite indie, but they're not popular and mainstream either, just broke into the mainstream just because of that weekly free download section. You know, people like free. And if they got that 30-second clip and they liked what they heard, they downloaded it. And, you know, before you know it, people would be downloading a band's entire album, entire past albums. It was just absolutely huge to get that. And Young the Giant got it, you know. So they pretty much continued on tour. They continued going. They did a lot of cool things with their fans, too. They did a lot of remixes of their original music as well, even kind of opening up to their fans and other bands around them to take advantage of doing that. Their third single was Apartment, which came, you know, into popularity about a year after that album was released. And then they toured again. And they did for a long time, because now you got to fast forward all the way to the end of 2013, where they released a single, It's About Time. And then in December of 2013, they released Crystallized, another single as well. And this album was actually picked up and released on the Fueled by Ramen album label as well. So they really kind of abruptly shifted, you know, their producers. And that album was absolutely big. You know, those songs that I mentioned, It's About Time and Crystallized, were huge. Mind Over Matter was very good as well. Their third studio album was Home of the Strange, which was released in 2016. A couple big songs off of that album, Something to Believe In, which is actually one of my favorite Young the Giant songs. You got to listen to them if you haven't kind of checked out what they've been doing since their first two albums. Mirror Master was released in 2018. Superposition is a great song off of that album too. And then American Bollywood was released in 2022, which was a huge shift on that album, where I mentioned in the beginning of this recording that their songwriting style, of course, is done by their lead singer, Sameer. And he said what he likes to do is he writes down pretty much one lyric, one sentence, maybe two, but he pretty much focuses the entire song off of that. You know, so it's kind of like he starts inward and starts growing the song outwards. An American Bollywood album is a very good example of that. In fact, if you listen to a lot of their albums, albums, yes, but if you listen to a lot of their songs, a lot of their songs tell a story, you know, even if it's kind of like a short song that repeats a lot of words. I think of like America is kind of like that, but it's just the way their music is even composed, the instruments. It just builds and builds and builds every single time and tells a story to the listener. So that's Young the Giant's story. They're still going strong to this day. And you got to check them out, you know. Definitely Cough Syrup if you haven't listened to them already. But I name-dropped a couple other newer songs to listen to if you haven't already. And that's it for Young the Giant. I will see y'all next week.